Another episode of the Vanguard X Radical Democracy Book Club. We're talking about Cornel West, Democracy Matters. We're going on to chapters 5 and 6 today. So this is, like I said, episode 3. Check out the last couple installments if you haven't after this one's over. But yeah, we're back with Mr. Kamali Rose of Radical Democracy. How's it going, man?
Going great. Appreciate y'all, doing this with me, and yeah, just loving this book so far. So yeah,
it's great shit. And it's crazy too, looking at the evolution. I know we talked about this a lot last time, so we won't have to bury too much into it. But again, I just think the evolution of even Cornel West, somebody who in 2005 was so deep in his career. I mean, this is somebody who'd been a tenured professor at Harvard, not Harvard, fuck Harvard, but Princeton and Yale. He was currently had just come out of a spat that had happened in Harvard back in 2004. But yet he's still so open to changing his mind, so open to changing his tone. And he's evolved in his positions too, which I just think is so admirable considering the position that he was intellectually, the clout that he possessed already at the time of this book, authoring, I think, 12 books or something, having so many accolades. He was still willing to look at the shifting dynamics in the world, come to new conclusions, and never back away from what his heart told him was the truth. And as we'll get into in this first chapter, he talks a lot about the rich history of Christianity. And Gavin and I know for sure, are about as secular as it gets. I was not raised as my first 6 years of my life, my mom took me to church and then quit. I've never been steeped in any kind of Christian religion. I've been an atheist since I was like 11, and I figured out what that was. But I wanted to ask you, Kamali, I believe we spoke about the fact that you might come from a Rastafarian tradition, if that's correct. But do you have any connection to faith in general, or did you connect to his passages on Christianity at all?
Yeah, no, I was raised Rastafarian, but I was, because of America's xenophobic immigration system, I was raised up in Boston by my mother. My father is native to Jamaica and has never been granted any kind of visa or anything like that to come up here to see any of his 5 children that live up here. So we were raised by my mother. And so I didn't get a lot of the sort of teaching of the Rastafarian culture, and it's what led me to ultimately, cut my hair, because I didn't feel that same connection to it. But I would visit, Jamaica every summer. And my father is a deeply religious person, and Rastafarians do use the Bible they're an Abrahamic religion. So they do, use and reference the Bible. And my father is a deeply religious person. So he's had me, and he doesn't have he can read, but not great. So he would have me read passages to him from the Bible often. So I've read through, a few chapters of the Bible, but I don't feel a strong connection to religion in any way. But I still have enough of the have done enough of the reading to sort of be able to, talk about and discuss certain concepts within the Bible, but not deeply religious. Never attended like Sunday school or anything like that, and didn't grow up inside of a Christian religion. And so yeah, nothing. Not a deeply religious individual for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting. And me neither. But I wonder if I imagine you do, because you were the one that put us onto this book in the first place. But I thought that a lot of the sentiment that he had, a lot of the criticisms that he had of the Christian religion are a lot of the criticisms that I have of the Christian religion, right? And in the same way that I don't have a problem with anybody practicing, whatever they want to worship, I don't give a shit. I just personally don't do that, right? But the problem that I have with organized religion in America, and something that Cornel West talks about, is how is that there has to is that the financial incentives of the Christian faith have been perverted in the exact same way that our politics have at large. And that's leading the whole indoctrination to be what he described as polluted. And
I loved what he did in differentiating and drawing a distinction between the Constantinian Christian versus the prophetic Christian. I think that he's of the prophetic Christian tradition. I think that a lot of Black Christians are of the prophetic Christian tradition, because they, you have to somehow square both, Christianity also with your own, reality and lived experiences as a Black person in America, for Black Americans at least, as far as being a second-class citizen. And so you hold on to more of the sort of prophetic tradition of Christianity. And I love that he draws this distinction, and he'll do it both in this chapter chapter 5 with Christianity, he does the same thing in drawing this distinction within hip hop as well in the next chapter that we'll discuss, between the Constantinian and the prophetic. And I think that somebody like Chris Hedges is somebody that we can also look to, who is of the prophetic tradition of Christianity, who comes out of that prophetic tradition.
Yeah, agreed.
And it's I thought it was great, because I agree what sort of, secular folks often are criticizing in Christianity, and something that we have to, we should be careful of, because what he pointed out, that a lot of people do identify as Christian, and we don't want to just not, necessarily push all those people away, is that he's able to sort of walk this line, but also to call them out in what he's really pointing to is he's criticizing the Constantinian, the sort of imperialist, and now, capitalist imperialist mindset within the Christianity, which allows them to do things like, there's like the prosperity gospel.
Yeah, I think that he actually talks about it really well when he talks about how the, merger of church and state is not just bad for the citizens under any given state, but it's actually bad for Christianity itself. It actually reflects terribly on the religion of Christianity, and anyone that actually considers them a Christian modeled after the behaviors of, say, Jesus Christ, knows that Jesus Christ was not an agent of the state. He was resisting the state, which is what led to his execution. So, I think Cornel West does some of the best job in articulating the way that, the whole anti-establishment message of Jesus, of Christianity, has been totally co-opted by the establishment to justify some of their worst crimes against humanity, which, has not only perverted Christianity as a faith, but the public perception of the faith too, and what it's capable of, what it's wielded for. And of course, that's not fair to your average Christian, your average person that does identify with the teaching of Jesus Christ, because of course, the actions of their state do not reflect them, just like the government of Israel uses Judaism to perpetrate its, massacre, just like a lot of, Muslim countries use the religion of Islam to justify, beheading gay people or whatever the fuck. It's the same thing with Christianity. When it's, weaponized by a state, or especially an imperialist state, they're going to use anything to justify their actions, regardless of what, holiness may have originally been associated with that thing.
Yep, I agree completely. I think the reference there to what's going on with Israel is obviously a poignant one right now, because of what we're seeing, just these events of the last 11 days, essentially this assault from these Jewish supremacists that have now risen up out of the state of Israel, and I think a similar thing is going on. It's exactly the same thing going on there, where it's this a perversion of these things that allow people to justify things like slavery and apartheid and ethnic cleansing. And we've seen the sort of two-sided nature of that. And this was one of the quotes that I had pulled, was actually from it was just regarding that, and it talks about this is on page 150 of the book. He says, "I have no doubt that most of these American Constantinian Christians are sincere in their faith and pious in their actions, but they are relatively ignorant of the crucial role they play in sponsoring American imperial ends. Their understanding of American history is thin, and their grasp of Christian history is spotty, which leaves them vulnerable to manipulation by Christian leaders and misinformation by imperial rulers. The Constantinian Christian support of the pervasive disinvestment in urban centers and cutbacks in public education and healthcare, as well as their emphatic defense of the hardline policies of the Israeli government, has much to do with the cozy alliance of Constantinian Christian leaders with the political elites beholden to corporate interests who provide shelter for cronyism. In short, they sell their precious souls for a mess of imperial pottage based on the false belief that they are simply being true to the flag and the cross. The very notion that the prophetic legacy of the grand victim of the Roman Empire, Jesus Christ, requires critique of and resistance to American imperial power hardly occurs to them." So he's saying, like, look at what happened to Jesus Christ, and look what empire did to Jesus, the Savior. If you don't, how can you look to his lived experience and not come out of that saying, have a mindset of helping the poor, helping the needy, helping the most vulnerable in society.
Yeah, Jesus was essentially a hippie. He was essentially a communist. You know what I mean? But I do want to ask a question to both of you guys, which is something that I've kind of long grappled with. And while I certainly do understand, as I just articulated, I certainly understand Cornel West's position on Christianity. I guess a big part of the reason why I've always personally consider myself someone that's more in favor of just moving beyond these archaic ideologies rather than trying to like reform them and refurbish them and like save them, is because while you certainly can find a very, you know, leftist or communist, anti-capitalist reading of the Christian Bible, or for that matter of the Quran, you know, depending on which part of it you're looking on, you can also cherry pick lots of genuine excuses to commit horrible actions. You know, if you look at the Bible, for example, there are verses in there which have been used to justify slavery. That's also part of the Bible, and it's also cherry picking to deny that that exists and to just think it's just this, oh, here's this manuscript about love and peace and communism. Like, no, that's actually cherry picking too. And the same goes with the Quran, which of course contains many messages of love and peace, but you can also find in there justifications for jihad and for oppression and for, you know, the oppression of, you know, misogyny and homophobia and all
same
that
in the Bible too, you know,
exactly. So whether you're picking, whether you're cherry picking to make the point of or to excuse imperialism and oppression, or you're cherry picking to, you know, this is about love and peace, either way, you're kind of ignoring the totality of the text, which again is rooted in a very archaic understanding of humanity, of science, of the world around us. And that's why I think it's just a little bit foolish, although understandable. Again, I wasn't raised in that tradition, so I'm sympathetic to why someone like Cornel West is so attached to this tradition. I simply would prefer if, as a society, we all move beyond, again, these archaic ideologies, which seem to continually separate us rather than unify us. That seems to be one thing that's been constant throughout the history of religion and humanity.
Yeah, I think so. I think the you know, I agree for sure. I mean, it's certainly in the regard of, you know, these you know, texts being able to be used in that they typically are used. You know, the more common feature of these is for them to be read and interpreted in a sort of imperialist Constantinian way. But I think that there's one thing, and this is something that Michael Brooks talked about and other folks. I think that we have to be careful because there is this idea of like a void being left behind by when we remove, you know, by spirituality and religion, where people have become more secular. We've left a void open there in this. I guess
I've just never agreed with that, because as someone who's always been secular, I don't think there's any hole in my life that needs to be filled. Like, I don't think I'm incomplete or whatever.
Not necessarily with us, but if you look at things like on the right, you know, on the right, what goes on, these you know, young men sort of being attached to like the Jordan Petersons of the world and the intellectual. But
he's a Christian. That's the thing. He defends Christianity.
No, of course, and that's the thing, is that these people who now identify as less and less religious, there's a void there to be filled of what religion used to provide. And what I'm getting at is that it was more about the structure of community that it provided, and not necessarily those texts. I think that the same things, we can have similar criticisms of science, which a lot of us as, you know, secular folks will often say like we trust the science, we believe in the science. But science has also been used for very perverse reasons to justify things like, you know, slavery as well, and the idea of, you know, Black people being, you know, innately dumber and subservient, indigenous people naturally, you know, being, you know, scientifically proving that they are I forget that whole sect of why am I forgetting it right now?
The race realism bullshit or whatever.
Yeah, that whole, exactly, absolutely. You know, the bell curve and all of these things.
Yeah, remember when Sam Harris, another hater of religion, also went to bat for the bell curve? Fucking piece of shit. But anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, anyway, I guess I'll jump in because I do have, I guess if I was going to try and, you know, as a secular atheist guy, if I was going to try and pick up and say, why do I think Cornel West is so dead set on this? One of his most powerful arguments to me about why he thinks that religion can be used as a means of promoting democracy is he argued that it's the only way that you could possibly do it in a place like the Middle East, where he says the religion of Islam is so deeply intertwined in their culture that when the United States came and imposed what they called Western democracy, it was such an abysmal failure, obviously in no small part due to the fact that there were bombing campaigns by the United States and all kinds of rigged, phony election. But Cornel West argues, I believe in an earlier passage, and maybe it was an interview I saw of him, so who fucking knows at this point, but he's arguing that we failed so miserably when we tried to introduce our secular Western concepts of democracy to the Middle East, and also the fact that the people never really were interested in receiving our Western secular concepts of democracy. And he said that it's only through embracing these elements of Islam, which is basically the like I feel like a lot of times in the West we underestimate how important religion is to people in the Middle East still, because it's like 10 to 1, maybe 100 to 1 more important than even people who I'd identify as Christian in America probably. And I think he's just arguing that it's either that or you're probably not going to be successful, and it's going to be so hard to overcome that you're just going to have I believe it's called a Ba'athist Islamic State, right, where they're essentially creating a Islamic State, just as they're trying to in Israel create a Jewish state. It's I think that would be why he supports that. That being said, I totally agree and sympathize with all of your criticisms of religion, Gavin. Yeah. And I do agree that if as a project in the West as well, where we are moving into a more secular society, that we should embrace the elements of community and tradition and mutual aid that ingratiated people to religion, and just recreate that in a secular society, and also promote democracy that way. That would be my recommendation. I just think that's why Cornel West is more married to his religious kind of approach.
Yeah, and I agree, and I agree with Gavin's sentiment about that's my personal belief is I'm very secular, non-religious, I don't know, atheist, I suppose. But the I think that the case that Cornel West is making in this book is an important one, because what he's doing is, I think he's a unique figure that is capable of doing, and this is what's special about Chris Hedges to me as well, because they come out of the theological a theological background where they were previously ministers and pastors, where it allows them, it sort of gives them a foot in the door where they can now speak to these people, and he can talk about the history of this religious history, the Christian history, and in a way that resonates with those people. And we need to bring these people over to our side. So even though I may not agree with him in the sense of like Christian beliefs in that way, I still think that the work that he's doing in the book is important work to try to convey to folks that he's able to reach these people that have these beliefs in a way that someone like you or I can't, because we can't speak to the Bible and they see us as sort of heretics and what infidels and that sort of thing. And so we need folks like this that are able to speak their language. And
I've always said that Cornel West has been just probably the absolute epitome of communication when it comes to speaking with people that may not already be on the same page as him or have some of the same more radical ideas that he has. He's just excellent in that regard. So no, definitely no argument there.
Yeah. One of the things that he also makes a really great point on and is critical of is the, like you talked about the prosperity gospel and imperial churches is what, what he calls it, and all that kind of stuff is how he talks about how philanthropy is fine, but he has a quote. It says, philanthropy is fine, but what about justice? Right. And the way that he says that I listen to the audiobook because I just love listening to Cornel West talk. Yeah. When he's, it's like philanthropy is fine, but what about justice? And you're just like, this hits, because he's like, he's like, we have to get to the bottom of it. Right. We're talking, he wants permanent solutions. And, he goes on to talk about how like this is what Jesus was pursuing as a, egalitarian approach to justice, and how it, is essentially being commodified and appropriated. But he also talks about how there's a long history of the church being misappropriated and being infected by capital, and how it's kind of a constant struggle against, Christians and the the commodification of the church. But another thing that I thought was interesting that just because of the time period that we're in now, Gavin and I were talking about this a little bit earlier, was the fact that he writes so much about the Passion of the Christ, which was Mel Gibson's movie. Obviously, Mel Gibson is like a pretty well-known anti-Semite. He has had so many like issues with that. But one of the things that I thought was interesting is how part of a while ago, the radical Christians were called out as being the more likely to be anti-Semitic, right? We talked about in another one of our streams a while ago, the parade that was really what's the Christian anti-Semitic parade, Gavin, that they spoof in Borat?
Well, are they supposed to be? I mean, there's supposed to be Muslim in that movie, so that wouldn't really be parodying Christians, would it?
I'm pretty sure there's like a real event where in Borat there's like the running of the Jew. I'm not sure they're parodying Muslims in that, but anyway.
Yeah, no, what they're parodying there is the like relationship between Muslims and Jews, which is obviously somewhat like friction filled, I don't
Anyway.
think the Kazaki village are supposed to be Christians.
No. Anyway, that wasn't exactly the point. But anyway, is that the Christian, ultra evangelicals have traditionally been the ones that are the actual.
Oh, you're thinking at the end of the movie when they like.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
At the beginning, it's the running of the Jew, but then it's like they reformed to Christians, and now they're
yeah,
like spearing Jesus, and they're like super anti-Semitic. Yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah. But anyway, that was the only point I was trying to make, is that and now it's like anybody who's on the left and supporting Palestine, when really it's the it's the evangelicals that have power. Nobody on the left that's supporting power or that's supporting Palestine has any power in the United States. It's the evangelicals and the big money that they've garnered to support them that have all the power.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but anyway,
seeing them continue to support American imperialism. They were very excited about the move of when Trump won, they voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump, and you can see this sort of move towards a neo-fascism by the fundamentalist Christian right. Chris Hedges talks about it constantly, and this is I think we're seeing something similar happen, where we had for a long time, even within Jewish communities, and especially even American Jewish folks, there's been this prophetic Jewish tradition versus the sort of Constantinian Jewish tradition of where you have the folks like Norman Finkelstein or Rabbi Joshua Heschel that Cornel West constantly references. So these folks that are have come out of this tradition, and we see it with a lot of. There's so many progressive left wing Jewish folks in America that have been using their voices to speak out and to speak out against what's what Israel's doing, and with in their settler colonialism. And that's, I think, something that we can sort of draw a distinction between, and then try to lift up those voices and show that there is there's always this sort of tension between these two factions.
Well, just to pivot a little bit, I wanted to ask you guys a question, because obviously Cornel West goes on to talk a lot about hip hop music. And I thought it was interesting the way he discussed this. And to be honest, while I do agree with some of what he's talking about here, I generally do kind of think his logic is a little bit flawed. And I just want to see if you guys agree with me or not, because he talks about how obviously hip hop started out as this like tradition of like anti-capital, more like radical music, more anti-establishment. And then it kind of got co-opted like by capitalism essentially into just glorifying everything that it had once rebelled against. But in my opinion, and again, I'm not someone who's like necessarily, been part of that tradition or anything, obviously. And a lot of the music that Cornel West writes about that ultimately like was co-opted and degraded hip hop music, he says, was appealing to exactly people like me, like white boys in the suburbs and stuff like that are like in high school. I mean, not that I am anymore, but at the time, like, like that's a lot of the people that were liking some of that music. But to me, that's more just indicative of hip hop going mainstream. Like anything that goes mainstream is going to have a wide variety of interpretations and deliveries, and it's going to take on many styles. So the fact that, hip hop had a gangster rap era and a bling era, like, I don't think that's really necessarily indicative of it being co-opted by like the capitalist forces that it once resisted. I just think that's like, it went mainstream, and if anything, that's I think that's a good thing, not a bad thing.
Well, that's the thing, though, because it's about like what is mainstream really, because mainstream in America does mean you have to appeal, because we are a majority white country. To be mainstream in America means you have to appeal to white people, or else you by definition are not you're not mainstream. You're going to be some sort of niche. You're going to be filling some sort of niche role at that point. But I think that there is I got on Bob Marley the Bob Marley shirt. I think that reggae is a perfect example of a music that has gone mainstream without selling out their or having to tend towards these sort of capitalistic practices. Now there's dance hall music, which more and more has to appeal to the masses and stuff, has taken on sort of a Western tone to it, and that's because it's come up in sort of at the same time as like more like right after like gangster rap sort of arose. You have like the real rise of like dance hall music, and I think that there is a way to be mainstream. Bob Marley has, you got this little island, Jamaica, and their music reaches all over the world, and you can be mainstream without changing your message, without having to sell out that message, and still have sort of like this radical revolutionary.
I guess it almost just has like a kind of a purity test vibe to it, where it's like, oh, if you stray from the original intentions of like hip hop artists, then you're selling out or whatever. Where to me, and again, feel free to correct me, I'm definitely no expert in the subject, but to me, when I see the wide variety of hip hop music, I think, well, there's a lot of different kind of artists. Not everyone that wants to, rap, for example, is going to have these beliefs. There are some people that are, want to make escapist music that is about, this lifestyle that a lot of people don't have, and that entertainment is escapism in a lot of instances. It doesn't always have to be like this hard-hitting anti-capitalist screed or whatever. So I don't know. It just kind of reminds me of this argument of like, oh, violent video games are going to make culture violent. Like, oh, if we're listening to gangster rap, then we're going to go out there and I'm going to start being misogynistic because I listen to gangster rap. Like, that's not true. Like, that's not how people work at all.
Well, if I'm going to jump in here, and Kamali, I'll pass it back to you afterwards, because I just wanted to. I'll give Cornel West a little bit of a pass because he was writing this in peak of the bling era, which is like my least favorite era of hip hop. I think that. I think that it does have a little bit of a finger waggy vibe, just because as somebody who loves hip hop, like I don't want to see hip hop put in a box either, Gavin. Like, and obviously, like I am a white dude from the suburbs, but I love hip hop, and I have been changed, and my perspectives have been radically altered. And we're gonna read some Outcast quotes. I'm not repping Outcast today, but he pulls a quote that Big Rube has from Southern Playlistic Cadillac Music. And for people who don't know, Big Rube is a spoken word guy. He's been in a lot of Outcast and Goody Mob traps, but he was down in the Dungeon crew, there was a dungeon where all the guys from Outcast and Goody Mob, and for people who don't know, CeeLo Green was in. If you really don't know, CeeLo Green was in Goody Mob, which has a legendary hip hop album called Soul Food. People should check that out. But also Southern Playlistic Cadillac Music. Anyway, I think that you have now, because of the people who pushed through the Ludacris and the all those guys and that were like top of the charts in 2004, and you had the Clips guys and the people who were doing it big and flashy. That probably the people that are in the top of mind of Cornel West when he's writing this in 2005. Because they did it, they pushed it far. Now you have people like Kendrick who are selling out stadiums, literally one of the biggest rappers in the world that I don't know any. I mean, Drake is probably a little bigger than Kendrick, but I mean, with the poetry and the potency of what Kendrick's saying, he now has the audience to reach all of these people. And he's not only illuminating what it's like to live in Compton, and talk about how it's not glamorous, and he is critical of himself, and he how many times does he talk about how on To Pimp a Butterfly that he feels survivor's guilt, that he feels like anytime that he gives himself something nice, he's capitulating to capitalism. He's able to have these kind of inner monologues together, right, and also be viciously critical of the tax exploitation against Black people, right? Wesley's theory, kicking off To Pimp a Butterfly, talking about how the way that when a Black person is able to reach affluence in America, it's extremely predatory against them, and all these different things that would never have been able to be exposed to the size and the reach of people that Kendrick had it not been for people who were like, I'm gonna punch through and just be like, yeah, I'm making my music about this shit,
See, now I don't know if I totally agree with that. I mean, I agree on what Kendrick's music is about and what he represents. But I think that somebody like Kendrick, I don't think that anything like the bling era or mumble rap or anything like that paves a way for a Kendrick Lamar to come up. I think that it's Kendrick Lamar's raw ability, but I don't know if you've seen, but Cornel West often cites Kendrick Lamar he does as one of those prophetic rappers. He's definitely of the sort of prophetic rap tradition and not the Constantinian tradition, where that's more and to me, maybe I'm just a crotchety old man, like that's like and I like the sort of my favorite rapper, you've heard me cite him before, Lupe Fiasco. He is of the prophetic rap tradition. I veer more towards, like, I respect more rappers like that are
But what do you think about like Andre 3000 and Big Boy? Because we're gonna get into Outcast. I love Outcast. Outcast is my favorite hip hop group, probably. But you know, they were I mean, their album's called Southern Playalistic Cadillac Music, right? Like they were but you know, I want to read this Big Rube quote because I was actually stoked because Cornel West actually just quotes it, and it's a little long, but I'll read it and then I'll let you get your response.
Yeah, no, I like the quote too. Yep.
But he says, operating under the crooked American system too long, outcast, pronounced outcast, adjective meaning homeless or unacceptable in society. But let's look deeper than that. Are you an outcast? If you understand and feel the basic principles and fundamental truths contained within this music, you probably are. If you think it's all about pimping hoes and slamming Cadillac doors, then you're probably a cracker or someone that thinks he's a cracker. Or maybe you just don't understand. An outcast is someone who is not considered to be a part of the normal world. He is looked at differently. He is not accepted because of his clothes, his skin, his occupation, his beliefs, or his skin color. Now look at yourself. Are you an outcast? I know I am. As a matter of fact, fuck being anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I think that like that kind of, you know, that rhetoric is something that we see, you know, it's the kind of thing like, you know, a lot of people aren't as familiar with Big Rube and they don't hear him as much. And because, you know, when you're speaking like that, I don't think that it necessarily, you know, the record labels, you know, sign you the same way and promote your music the same way. But what he's talking about there, I think, is still highlighting that you know, there is this sort of the two sides of, in the way that, and it's often just like with the Bible, you know, there's ways of interpreting the music as well, right? To see it as, it's kind of like, I forget what Jay-Z's line is, where he's like, you know, when I say this stuff, it's not because I'm trying to glorify it, you know, I'm telling you this stuff so that you don't have to go and do it.
Well, yeah,
you know?
and that's kind of what I feel like, at least a little bit, Cornel West is maybe missing at some instance. Like some of this music is coming from these circumstances. It doesn't necessarily glorify them. It's a reflection of them. It's a reflection of living in these realities.
Sure, but then some of it is just, I mean, again, this is back to my crotchety old man stuff, but like some of this stuff is just trash nowadays. Like it's like, you know, there's no substance to it.
Well, yeah, but I feel like you could make that argument about any kind of genre, right? It's not necessarily like
any popular music.
No, of course, but I think that what he's pointing out is that there is this you know, conscious rap is there, but it doesn't get the same kind of, you know, mainstream ability. You don't get the same kind of elevation because they're playing to an audience, right? They're forced to play to an audience for capitalistic purposes. It's about, well, I need to make more money so that I can, you know, I want to sell records. If you don't sell records, you don't get signed by the labels. Well, even J. Cole talked about this on one of his albums when he talked about how when he's talking about Jay-Z producing his album and how Jay said, we can't put this out without a radio track. You know, you got to give us something that we can play on the radio. And that being like, you know, and he's like, you know, he's like, labels, you know how these labels are so archaic with their you know, something about like how they have these archaic formulas to trying to develop CDs or whatever. And he's saying, like, you know, it's because there's this capitalist pressure and you know, look at even Jay-Z in the music. And then you have,
Jay-Z's a billionaire, right? Like Jay-Z's not leading a fucking socialist
but he turns around and says shit like, you know, when you see me up on that stage, you know, that's like you succeeding as a black person. And that's that bullshit that it's like, and people will, and my problem is like that you know, hip hop in a lot of ways, there's a set of hip hop that it's not conscious rap. And like conscious rap there's conscious rappers, and we all know who we would put into that basket of conscious, Most Def, Common, you know, Kendrick Lamar.
He also quotes Black Star, which is dope. I love Black Star.
Black Thought. And I totally agree with you, and again, this is not exactly my experience to speak to, but wouldn't you agree that some of the the hustle or like the gangster lifestyle that is quote unquote glorified by a lot of hip hop, those rappers, they had to resort to that lifestyle because they couldn't succeed in the capitalist system that's been set up. So it's almost like an alternative entrepreneurship, which is like by necessity.
No, absolutely. I don't think that he's necessarily like because he talks about he cited Ice Cube,
Chuck D.
Chuck D. He also cited Tupac, and he said, you know, these were gangster rappers that had amazing lyrics and were able to.
Yeah, he called them linguistic geniuses.
Linguistic geniuses that were able to tie together those events without. I don't think, you know, and this is and I make a distinction between East Coast Tupac and West Coast Tupac, to be honest, because as soon as, to me, when Tupac was East Coast, that's where I'm a fan of Tupac. Keep your head up, Dear Mama, like that's the Tupac that. And then when he got over, and is doing with Dre, and he's over there, and it's like I don't, I can't think of off the top of my head because there's so few, California, whatever the fuck.
You're fine, dude. I know what you mean. Yeah. But one thing, if I'm gonna just continue, go ahead. Sorry.
No. I'm just I think that there is a distinction that we're saying. You can talk about those sorts of things in a way that is still drawing attention to the sort of the inequalities and the pain and the strife of growing up in those environments. Without, there is a set of people, though, I do think, is that it's like make it rain on them.
Well, of course, of course those people exist. Yeah, but I think that the mainstream hip hop gets a bad rap when there are mainstream success stories, right? So, just to bring up another example that comes to my mind when I think about politically active rappers, right? And obviously, I don't agree with this person on 100% of issues. Like, I don't agree with anybody on 100% of issues. Sort of like your Lupe Fiasco thing. I bit my tongue a little bit when I was trying to defend this person because, Anyway, I love Killer Mike's music, right? And Killer Mike has some of the best bars ever, right? So. Look at Reagan, right? They declared a war on drugs like a war on terror, but what they really did was let police terrorize whoever, but mostly black boys, and they would call us and lay us on our belly while their fingers on their triggers, they boots on our head, their dogs was on our crotches, and they would beat us up if we had diamonds on our watches, and they would take our drugs and money as if they pick our pockets. I guess that's what the privilege of policing for some profits. But thanks to Reaganomics, prison turned to profit because free labor is the cornerstone of U.S. economics because slavery was abolished unless you are in prison. You think I am bullshitting? Then read the 13th Amendment. That was before all of this shit became popular again. When rap music came out, this was like before it was cool to be woke again. You know what I mean? On like a broad scale thing. And I feel like Killer Mike, it's like there's that Kendrick Lamar, right? Where it's like critics want to say you missed when hip hop was rapping, motherfucker. If you did, then Killer Mike would be platinum. And I feel like the change is the craving for that shit because now Killer Mike, who did support Bernie Sanders, his politics are way better than most people. So let's not hammer the fact that he's been wrong about some things. He's put the forefront, right? He's talking about how Barack Obama went after Gaddafi. He's talking about, institutional racism. He's talking about the prison industrial complex. And he is also, considered a bling rapper, right? He's from the Atlanta scene, he's and yet he'll also put out a smash hit song with the hook. Look at all these slave masters posing on your dollar, right? Like that's the kind of shit that I think Cornel West may have underestimated at the time when he was writing this, is that the mainstreamification of hip hop allowed more people like me who would have never been exposed to some niche shit that stayed in the tape game, passed around between people who know underground in the hip hop world. But now people like me are able to get exposure to these radical thoughts through hip hop. And I'll be like so honest, even though I'm a white boy cliche, I really do feel like listening to so much hip hop opened my mind up and exposed me to the reality that I was just completely shielded from, even though I thought I was experiencing things, and obviously we all go through shit, but you get a completely different worldview.
Yeah. And I know what you're saying, and I agree with that 100%. I guess what my one issue, and I maintain this with the way Cornel West talks about this, and maybe that's just because I am personally an artist, but I don't think any artist has any responsibility to be moralizing, to put any sort of a message in their art. I think you can make a piece of art that is totally escapist, that totally glorifies whatever would be considered a cultural ill, and I don't think that's a problem. I think that that's an artistic expression that's just as legitimate. And oftentimes it does come from a genuine place of escapism. Again, not every artist has to be a preacher.
No, well, see, but I do feel like it is a problem, unfortunately, when you're for Black people living in this America to simply make it about, and this is what Cornel West talks about when he talks about I'm trying to think of the exact phrasing that he uses, but he says, the Black, the abandonment, of by the shit. I gotta. He talks about the Black elites and them turning their back on the rest of of Black folks or whatever. You're muted, Zach.
Yeah, it's essentially it's another way of him saying he's talking about the black faces in high places quote, which he normally goes back to. It's not quite that, but that's essentially the sentiment that he's referring to.
the betrayal by the black elite. That's what it is. So he talks about the betrayal by the black elite, and in that, you know, there's a clip of him talking about this. But if you look up betrayal by the black elite, Cornel West, if you look it up, you'll find a clip of him talking about this, and he talks about how there's this shift amongst, you know, the black elite, and I would put these folks in that where
I just don't think artists are part of the elite. I mean, artists are making.
I absolutely put them as part of the elite. When you're making that kind of money,
okay, if you're Jay-Z, but if you're like,
no, of course, but that's the thing. If you're not them, and you're making this music, you're doing it because you're trying to get to ascend to that level. You're not making music because you're trying to deliver a message, which was supposed to be the point of hip hop, of like bringing the, you know, black pain to the forefront of people's mindset. I mean, not using black, let me say, like not using black pain to then, you know, commodify it in a way that is only beneficial towards you in an individualistic, capitalistic way. And so I absolutely think that they have a responsibility to not sell out to, and this is where he's trying, what Cornel West is talking about, is that this is about when your goal is to be more mainstream. And I think that this is something that we got to look out for, even in the media, right? Like when we try to, you know, if we try to become too, you know, to appeal to the masses, when we try to be more popular than deliver the truth, right? Then we start to give over to becoming the same like what corporate media is, where it's all about salaciousness and you know the just the hot topic, and you know, and he talks about this in the last chapter, where he's talking about the experience that he had when he had that riff with Larry Summers, right? That it was you know, the way that the media was grabbed onto this salacious story in a way that they didn't cover, you know, other things that he did, the same way that, you know, even Zed Jelani was talking about recently, how we always cover Palestine when there's violence there, but we don't cover the non-violent things that the Palestinians have been doing all the while, because it's not as salacious in the news. People don't, you know, that it's,
yeah, but it's not the role of a music. It's not the role of an artist to educate people. And regardless of your skin color, I mean, regardless of your skin color, I don't think it's incumbent. Well, I mean, it's definitely not incumbent on black people to educate white people about this stuff via their art. I know that's not directly what you're saying, but it kind of is being implied by that argument that it's incumbent on black artists to make art that only furthers the liberation of black people, instead of, for example, making escapism if they want to. Films are escapism, video games are escapism.
But black people don't have time for escapism. Like, we can't fucking, like, I get you, I get it, but like, we got shit. We are, you know, we're sitting in a country where we are, you know, the colonized.
You don't think there's any place for art? You don't think there's any place for escapist art? You don't think there's any place for that?
Not when people are struggling. Like, we can't just be out here. Not escapist art for the sake of just making.
You don't think
money.
you can just go to the movie theater and sit down and watch a movie and relax and enjoy yourself without?
Of course.
Well, somebody has to make that, though, right?
How's that any different than making an escapist hip hop album that glorifies, you know, whatever you want to say? Then how's that any different than watching Fast and Furious?
No, but again, I'm not saying that there can't be a handful of people that go out there and do that. Good for them. But when the core of it becomes about this, when the entire industry is overtaken by this sort of Constantinian capitalist, you know, approach of like, well, we have to.
I mean, the whole country is overtaken by a capitalist approach.
Exactly. But we black folks should be resisting that. Like, we should realize. But also
you can't put people in a capitalist system and then expect them to not comment on the conditions which they live in.
No, but it's not commenting on.
Oh, it is. It absolutely is. It absolutely is.
No. Make it rain on them hoes is not a commentary on capitalism, right? Like Immortal Technique was doing commentary on capitalism, right?
Who cares?
Who the fuck? Where's he ascended to? You know, like they're like rappers that rap about, you know, socialism and like they get nowhere. If you are rapping look at what's going on with J. Cole and No Name right now in hip hop.
What about Kendrick Lamar?
Example.
He's rapping about anti-establishment stuff. What do you mean you don't get anywhere?
No, of course he has. I mean, he has incredible talent, and the same thing for Lupe Fiasco. There is
people with talent usually tend to rise to the top. I mean,
but look at the majority of hip hop at this point. I'm just saying, look at the majority. Yes, there's always like exceptions, right? Those are exceptions to the rule, and I would love to see more exceptions like that. I would love to see more people strive to be Kendricks in Commons and Mos Defs. But when they don't see the same kind of mainstream success for a Common and a Mos Def, it becomes harder. And I don't think that, you know, even though he's maybe anti-capitalist in ways, and I've had this discussion with Kwame from Racist Media recently, recently about, and he's a massive Kendrick Lamar fan. And we were talking about, are there any socialist, real communist or socialist rappers? And we were actually trying to go through it. He had cited Kendrick Lamar as a possibility. And when we really broke it down, it was like, no, he may be anti-capitalist, but he's not socialist. He doesn't talk about,
what about Zach De La Rocha?
Who's Chuck De La Rocha?
Oh, Zach De La Rocha was the front man for Rage Against the Machine. He's a native American or indigenous rapper, but he was the front man for Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah, I like see him and Tom Morello. Like, I think that what they were talking about was much closer to to a socialist mindset. But
that being said, Kamali, they were also selling out stadiums full of people while they were delivering that message.
Oh, I'm not saying you can't make money or that I'm hating on people for making money. Like, make money.
No. And I feel like we're getting a little bit lost in the weeds here, because I understand both of your guys' sentiments here. So maybe because I understand Gavin and Gavin's position that any people can make art about whatever the fuck that they want to.
No, I get.
And hold on 1 second, because I also see your point, Kamali, that there is urgency, and I understand seeing and feeling that compulsion to speak out about those things. Certainly I feel it, certainly you feel it, certainly Gavin feels it, and I bet you every single person listening to a podcast like ours or yours feels that compulsion. However, I just feel like there has to be a place in art and for Black people, just like there is so many spaces for white guys like us. Like, if I go ahead and I start, like, if I were to just have never gotten involved in politics at all, Kamali, like, I would have been able to just start a fucking pop band and start singing about how I love getting my like dick sucked and like spending money, and like there would have been none of that pressure put on me. I would have just been another person doing this. So as a white guy, I feel like every other person should just have the freedom to do that if that's their choice. But don't you
feel the same way about Palestinians? Shouldn't Palestinians just have the freedom to do whatever they want? But they don't. They just.
But they don't. But it's the onus on. It's the onus on everybody that wants to make art to liberate the Palestinians.
No, you're saying, what does that have to do with anything, right? Because the situation that they are forced in, right? They're literally fighting for survival, and they do not have time to. They don't have the freedom. If we're saying, yeah, we want to live in a world where everybody would have the freedom to do that, that would be wonderful and beautiful.
You think people can't make music they want to make because of what's going on in Palestine?
No, listen, I'm saying that. No, Gavin, don't listen. I'm saying that, do the Palestinians have the same ability to just go out there and make music for the fun of it? Do you see any Palestinian, musicians?
No, but that doesn't.
Because why? Because their situation is so dire that they have other things that they have to focus on and fight for. And why is it that why do I have to sit here and fight for this shit and lose my job and be fired over this shit and be canceled and be pushed out and be fucking homeless? Why do I have to do that while Jay-Z can fucking rap about whatever the fuck he wants and make $1 billion fucking dollars and not look back and take care of his fucking people? No, fuck that. No. That is an absolute, it's again, and this is all we're saying. This is all that Cornel West and I are saying. All people are doing is abandoning. They are looking out. They have replaced a we mentality with an I mentality. It's ruthless ambition, and it is of the capitalist system. And capitalism is a white Western invention that has been imposed upon these people, and they absolutely are becoming beholden to this idea of just I need to get ahead. What they're doing is doing things for numero uno. And I'm sorry, but I don't give a fuck. I don't respect anyone that is only looking out for themselves. I do not respect that shit. No, nobody gets to just sit around and just worry about themselves. That's exactly what capitalism wants us to do. As socialists, we should be believing in trying to come together and build a sense of community.
I agree that's what that's the position people should be in. However, to try to force people to that position is so counterproductive to our movement. And honestly, there are a lot of people that have made the calculation that they have every right to make, that they want to live their lives not in relation to every horrific crisis which is currently unfolding simultaneously in this world, and that is a decision that people have the right to make.
But they no, Gavin, no, they don't. Not people do not have the right to make that decision.
If you not just privileged people, homeless, lots of oppressed people make the decision.
Tell me which homeless person has the right to make that decision. Which homeless person has the right to?
That's not what I'm talking
about.
But
you said that anybody has the right. And what I'm saying is, not when there are some people out there still suffering. We do not have the right to just look out for ourselves when we know that there is suffering going on in this world. I'm sorry.
I'm not talking about just looking out for ourselves. I'm talking about making the art we want to make. That's a divine right.
No. There is. It's not divine right because some people do not have that right.
Okay,
if you're homeless, you don't have that right. Daddy, come on.
I mean,
if you're homeless,
you don't have the right to do a lot of things.
You can't buy a fucking instrument. So how can you even make the music that you want to make?
So then why should you have the right to do anything?
What do you mean? What? I don't get that. Like, I'm just saying that.
This is getting a little bit like incendiary for no reason. Essentially, the crux of the argument right here is what we're having a disagreement, and this is fine. I don't think we're gonna.
To the fucking person telling me to calm the fuck down in the comments, like, do not tell black people to calm the motherfucker down. All right? Sorry. Listen.
All right. No. Because I unfortunately I also have to make dinner and shit. So I don't want to like blow like have this not get like resolved. I think the crux of the disagreement here. Yeah. Look.
Yeah.
What did you have to say, Kamali?
No. Go. I'm gonna get a quote. I'm gonna pull a Cornel West quote for your audience that's telling me to calm down right now. I got you. Keep going though.
Yeah. No. I mean, like I said, I just think that the crux of the disagreements here is that whether or not people are obligated to spend their life pursuing the liberation of all people. Obviously, the agreement is that is the correct move to spend your life doing that. The debate is whether or not that's obligatory, and people can explore that. But I don't
think that nobody's like, I'm not saying it's obligatory. I'm just saying when you don't do it, you deserve criticism. That's all. Like when you don't do it and you got your people are out there suffering and you're literally rapping about how your life is. Look at Lil Wayne. Have you ever heard Lil Wayne talk about his situation? He literally said, no, don't you know Black lives already matter? Look at me. I'm rich and I'm young, I'm black and I'm rich. Black lives already matter. So he said that's why he has no reason, no need to support the Black Lives Matter movement because Black lives already matter. Look at me, baby. He's like, if you know, when the cops are out there killing black people, that's because they're doing something wrong. We can literally pull up the clip of Lil Wayne.
I'm not arguing with you about that. I'm not arguing with you about that.
Yeah,
I'm just saying
the idea that these people are like, have some sort of mindset where they're actually like looking out for, for the rest of black people, that they're concerned. No, it's just capitalism sunk into these people's heads where they and again, I'm not saying that you don't get to make. There's plenty of people out there making music. Make music if you want to make music, but don't turn around and act like when you start making music for the purpose of making money, and then in that works out for you or whatever, don't then act as if you're just the same as all the rest of the people that are out there struggling, just trying to survive, while you sit there and rap about bullshit that is, not making anyone smarter, not teaching anyone anything, not art was supposed to have, the value of like beauty and but is this beautiful when we're misogynizing women, in that kind of like, Lupe Fiasco in one of his songs, he says, I used to hate hip hop because the women degraded, like he's like he used to hate hip hop. He's like, their favorite word is bitch. And he's like, listen, I used to hate this music because it was so degrading towards women. So like the idea that like these people just can say whatever the fuck they want and just in the name of art and not realize that like, hey, your art is actually harmful. There is a way for art to turn around.
So do you think that video games inspire violence?
No, I don't think that video games inspire violence any more so than movies inspire violence. I mean, yes, to the extent of like, does Scarface inspire violence? Like,
then how is a rapper being misogynistic and inspire misogyny?
No, it perpetuates that stereotype, and again, it sexualizes women in a way that then turns around and makes men treat women a certain way. So
and you can make the exact same argument about video games. It romanticizes violence and makes people more violent. I don't understand the difference in the.
Okay,
and I'm not trying to argue with you, bro. I just literally want to have a conversation about these.
Like guys, I get no. Okay, so let me read this real quick. Let me just read the Cornel West quote, which I probably read before, but I got to do it again. In his book, Black Prophetic Fire, he says, he quotes, he's talking about Malcolm X, and he says, Malcolm would say over and over again, you are not going to get something detached and disinterested from anybody who is sitting on the stove and the stove is burning their behind. No, they're going to holler out. They're going to respond deeply and viscerally. He never forgot the black folk on the stove. He never forgot the prison system, black folk on the stove, massive unemployment, black folk on the stove, indecent housing, black folk on the stove, inadequate healthcare, black folk on the stove. And from the very beginning, from slavery to Jim Crow, so that the sense of catastrophe, the sense of emergency, the sense of urgency, the sense of needing to get it out, to cry out, to shout, somehow allowed that fire inside of his bones to be expressed with power and with vision. He never lost that. All right. So to people telling me like, calm down. I'm sorry that I can't fucking calm down, but this shit is my life. It's really my fucking life. Like it really is.
First of all, by the way,
calm down. It's like, what's up?
I was saying neither of us were ever telling you to calm
Oh
down.
no! It was in the comments. It was no. I'm reading the comments.
Yeah. Fuck the comments though. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
but it's your But I know it's coming from your audience, and your audience is going to, is going to be more white folks in there. And I just gotta call it out because
I'm not. Yeah, I understand
all the time. You see, it's
but
here,
one
okay,
person
here, but it's me every day of my life, Gavin. Like everywhere I go, everywhere I exist.
No, I understand that.
Every time I get excited, it's why are you getting so angry, Kamali? Stop being so angry.
I would never say that, man.
Perception of me as no, I know it. You would never, like, Gavin. I'm not like I'm just trying. Like this is me having a lively debate.
No, that's awesome, bro.
And I'm angry, or I'm like, and it's not. It's just like I'm excited about the topic.
No, but bro, I get the sense that I'm like angering you, and I don't want that to in any way be the case. Like I don't want you to feel like I'm confronting you in any way when I'm literally.
No, of course not. Man, I don't mind. You should confront me. Like you have every right to confront me, Gavin. Like,
okay, well, I just don't want it to come off like I'm being antagonistic.
No way.
Okay,
Absolutely,
because I'm just trying to get to the bottom. Like,
dude, I love the fuck out of y'all. I hope y'all know that. All right,
I love the fuck out of you too, bro.
Love for y'all, all right?
And I just want to understand the difference here because Cornel West was in the Matrix movies, which in my opinion, despite their pseudo intellectual sheen, are actually some of the fucking dumbest action movies ever that have mass displays of gratuitous violence that basically suggests that the way to break out of an oppressive system is via mass displays of gratuitous violence, and that's something that Cornel West participated in, and then called it
we learned through this book, right, that he participated in hip hop too, right? He made rap albums, right? Like he made rap albums. But I see what you're saying. You're saying that he, in this way, he was actually participating in something directly.
But I wouldn't turn around. And I wouldn't turn around and then accuse someone that likes the Matrix of perpetuating violence. Because I understand that that's a movie.
What did he make his life's work is really the question. And that's the difference, I think, is that these rappers, if they make, look, like Nas made some songs that were like, talked about, what was it? Is it is it Uchiwali, or is it what did Jay-Z say in his track or whatever, in Ether or whatever, but it's like, or is it Uchiwali, or is it Black Girl Lost, and like Nas made songs about like club bangers and shit like that, right? But I still love Nas as a rapper.
Yeah, well, if I ruled the world, I'd free all my sons, right?
Exactly. Like I still think when you look at the totality of his life's work, it was still positive and still tried to still draw on those things in a way that was substantive and meaningful to everyone, and particularly to the Black communities that he was raised out of, right? And look at Cornel West, the totality of his work. I think none of us would say that he is, what he's done has been about just self-promotion and just like a ruthless ambition or anything like that. There is a serious set of people, and again, I just point to the what's going on with No Name and J. Cole right now, where No Name called out called out rappers that were, and she said, a lot of y'all have a platform and you're not using your platform to try to educate people. And look what happened to her. No Name, she's a good rapper. She has music. She does book clubs like what we're doing right now. They're reading The End of Policing by Alex Vitale right now in their book club with No Name. That's a rapper, a Black woman rapper who is educating people, doing the reading, and called out rappers with platforms that don't
called out Killer Mike.
Real shit. Yep. Yeah. Exactly.
I also but I'm also just worried that you can use any situation of injustice going on anywhere in the world and use that to bludgeon artists over the head and say, well, why aren't you making music about what I want you to be, or why aren't you making your art about this issue instead of what's on your mind? Like, I think you can make a piece of art about drinking a cup of coffee and smoking a cigarette, and that's totally valid. It doesn't have to address capitalism necessarily, and I just don't see why that's different for like rappers. You know what I'm saying?
It's just when all you do is just all you got is bitches and hoes and I'm pimping and I'm this and that, and again, in a way that's not trying to be like I'm doing this and this isn't I'm not saying you should go out and do this, or like really the music, it's dumbed down in a way to me where it's like Lupe Fiasco made the song Dumb It Down, and he talks about he talks on his records about how they the industry is constantly trying to tell you that you got to dumb down your music, and there's these perverse incentives, and they're constantly being pushed and moved in that direction, not necessarily because they're like bad people or anything like that, but because
but to expect anti-capitalist art to come from a capitalist system is just a folly. I think the best capitalist art, that's always going to thrive in the underground.
Yeah, but that's the thing. But I'm not saying it doesn't, like, wouldn't you agree that like Kendrick Lamar is anti-capitalist? Lupe Fiasco, his most recent album, he says
I mean, I don't know if I'd call him anti-capitalist. He has a Nike deal where he makes millions of dollars for promoting shoes that are made in sweatshop conditions. I don't know if you'd call him anti-capitalist.
See, even then, you see, and that's what I tried to, you know. I'll be honest. You know, I haven't listened to enough Kendrick Lamar. Like I've honestly I've moved away from, you know, hip hop as I, you know, because I just I've been let down by hip hop artists.
I will just to jump in here because I had one question that kind of arose from this, and I wonder what you think about this model moving forward. Is, you know, one thing that was pioneered by hip hop that changed the entire music industry forever, and even though the content of the music was not necessarily anti-capitalist, and even though their most recent project was Ass, the Chance the Rapper phenomenon, wherein he said, I'm not signing to a label. I'm only living off of concert ticket sales and, you know, doing merch. I feel like that's another example of, through, you know, commercial media, these anti-capitalist, you know, things kind of arise. So I definitely hear a lot of the criticism that you're offering as far as people who will not expand their commentary outside of, you know, things that are narrowly capitalist, and just the way that we you know, criticize other people for, you know, worshiping at the altar of capitalism, for a better word. We should also, you know, critique rappers. And I also will, you know, but I, at the same time, I don't want to lie to people and say that I don't know why people are enjoying that, or why these catchy tracks aren't like popular. And so I just feel like it might repel people a little bit to, like, you know, kind of make them feel bad for liking that kind of music when it's extremely popular. And also, you know, a lot of times really musically advanced. So even if you are listening to hip hop that's trap music, right? Take the lyrics aside, the instrumentation and the production that's being laid is very advanced, you know, level of kind of sonic
sounds
soundscape.
good. Yeah, it sounds good. It makes you feel good. Like I'm not saying there's no place for music like that or anything like that. I'm just saying that when those people do that, they're not doing it out of some sort of, like, you know, that there is room for critique there, and that they are, you know, they're doing it for, you know, oftentimes what we've seen is it's not just somebody just doing it and just making that music and then just like putting that out and walking away. Like, they're trying to sell those records, right? And so the idea that they're not trying to sell to a market and not looking at a market and thinking in the same sort of free market fundamentalist kind of ways of, like, thinking, oh, well, there's a market for it, so I'm gonna serve this market. This is the line that I was talking about from J. Cole. I just pulled up the lyrics. It's from his song, which is funny that we were talking about Nas earlier, but it's from J. Cole's song "Let Nas Down." And in this track, if people aren't familiar, he's talking about how essentially Nas came up to him after a show and kind of was like, damn, you know, kind of like it said, like, he kind of let him down by sort of selling out in his music and in commercializing his music in a way. And so he's sort of you know, reflecting on that. And so in the second verse, he says, I couldn't help but think that maybe I had made a mistake. I mean, you made me, he says, I couldn't help but think that maybe I had made a mistake. I mean, you owe me, dog. I thought that you could relate. He's talking to Nas at that point, saying he thinks he thought he could relate to, you know, making commercialized music. He says, but while I shot up the charts, you mean telling me that I was not up to par when I followed my heart? Granted, my heart was tainted by my mind that kept on saying, where's the hits? You ain't got none. You know Jay'll never put your album out without none. And dog, you know how come labels are archaic, formulaic with their outcome. You know, they don't know. They just study the charts. Me, I study the shows. The fans study the hearts. You know, he says, I had a feeling I was killing, and this music we were spilling out would change lives forever. Fuck the label, put it out. And so he's, you know, he's wrestling with these ideas, and here he is, you know, a rapper, you know, towards the height of his career, and he's still wrestling with these ideas and saying, look, inside of this industry, there's this constant, you know, formulaic, archaic way of saying you have to have this thing and it has to fit this mold because that's what's going to sell. And that is a reality that we have to face with under capitalism. Is like that's what the you know, the incentive structure is there for people to sell records. And so what sells records in America? Making music that white people like. Let's be real. Like, 13% of America is black. If you make records that only black people like, your shit will not go beyond whatever, you know, what is it, about 40 million people or something sold if you only make music that appeals to black people. So you have to make music that appeals to white people.
And that's assuming that every single black person likes the same kind of music that you were going to reach.
And what Cornel West is trying to show there is that, you know, maybe me, what's changed the way the course of hip hop and made it so, you know, dumbed down in this way and misogynistic and all these things is not that this is what black people necessarily wanted, but let's be real, it's what white folks in America wanted, and it sold to them and it played well with them. And I don't think that's I think that's just a
no, that's a very fair criticism, Kamali, of the fact that the things that are, and I do understand after listening more, like, because what Cornel, I imagine what Cornel West's, you know, bone to pick with this is that you're right. It sort of makes people believe that these are the images and these are the things that are most valuable to the black community, when really this is just the only option for success that the broader capitalist structure offers people to talk about. And I remember listening to Trisha Rose on the Tightrope, and I love that podcast and recommend that everybody should listen to the two of them whenever they have a free time and see the interviews pop up. But she was talking about how and I think she was talking to Brianna Joy Gray, actually. But they were talking about Cardi B, and how Cardi B was a Bernie supporter, and Trisha Rose was being kind of critical of Cardi B and saying that we have to recognize that while she is advocating for the right things, we still have to remain broadly critical of the fact that she has acquiesced into this capitalist system. But while still understanding and empathizing with the fact that she would have never become a known quantity to even speak out or vocalize any issue had she not decided to play in this game. And I just feel like it's a really complicated catch-22 for a lot of artists. And it's just not something that I, as a white guy, feel like I would have to make that choice, which is why I, you know, feel reluctant to finger wag at somebody and say you should be doing something different when your life, when that fucking is that onus is never put on white people. And you can see the same thing in sports, right? Where it's always like, oh, why isn't this black athlete, or why isn't this, you know, athlete of color speaking out about this issue, when there's never the onus of, okay, all of the athletes in Major League Baseball, or not all of them, but like so many are white guys, right? There's a lot of medical, I don't mean to erase them, but I just mean so many baseball players in America are white guys. And that's a lot to do with the fact that it takes a lot of resources and privatizing and, things like that. So when you're a kid, it makes it really expensive to become a baseball player, etc. But none of those people were out being outspoken. It was the fans that pushed the All-Star game out of Georgia. So I don't know. I'll drop this back off.
Yeah, and I agree. I agree with that sentiment. The problem for me is because of my, because of the skin color, I gotta talk to my folks. It's kind of like we'll collect our people, you collect your people, and I fuck around because I don't know if y'all know, but my mother is white. My mother is Italian. My mother's white. So sometimes I talk about race in a way that makes people uncomfortable sometimes, because I was raised by a white woman. My father's black, so I experience race slightly differently and come from the privileged background of having a white mother as well. But I often talk about race in a way that will make folks uncomfortable. So I just want to.
Uncomfortable. No, yeah.
No, not y'all. I'm just saying it generally speaking, whatever, to the audience that's watching here, as they watch on, that don't know. But yeah, so when I say these things, some people, sometimes I get called racist or something for saying something like this. But I'm like, guys, my mom's white. But anyhow, so it's kind of a thing where it's like, these are my, these are people that I see as my people, and so it's kind of like a collect your people, kind of thing where it's like, this is what I can speak to, and so I do think that white folks, and I think that everyone should be, and there are people, there's plenty of artists out there that we can all look to that do this with their music, and even when you don't do it with your music, you do it with your platform, right? So I'm not saying they have to do it with their music necessarily. Gavin, you may not do it with your music, but you're doing it with your platform. You're still spending your spare time, investigating this stuff, highlighting these issues, doing important ass work. You're talking to, you are doing critical, crucial work, valuable work for society, while at the same time, yeah, you can go off and make some music and do it for the fun of it, but you're not doing that for capitalist, gain or anything like that. And when you do start it and you do that and disappear on, doing this kind of work, then you will see me criticize your ass. I will be out there, Gavin, talking shit about you, but I'll still buy your album. Don't worry, I got you.
Yeah, I guess my last thing I'll say is that sometimes that whole line of logic that we're referring to me, it kind of just reeks of criticizing the individual rather than the system, even though it's on the predication that, oh, why aren't you criticizing the system enough, when you're directing your fire at someone with no power, even if that person is richer than your average individual. There's still just in a system that's essentially out of their control. It's kind of like, why don't billionaires just donate more of their money? Like, oh, if we just had more philanthropy, then everything would be fine. You can apply that same logic to, well, if we just had more capitalists that speak out, then we'd be fine. No, that's not true.
I agree. I agree, and that is a good point. I think that's a good point. I just think that my response is like, we're all with it. We are all individuals within a capitalist system, right? And so like
exactly.
But we all find ways to still try to rise above that and try to break out beyond that. And so
I think in a sense, for some people, rising above that and breaking beyond that is making a living for themselves that doesn't involve subjecting themselves to exploitation at Walmart or whatever the fuck.
And guys, I don't mean to jump in and cut this off early. I do have to pop back out.
I actually have to go too, but it was a great conversation, guys.
Yeah, and also, and honestly, we'll get back on the podcast. And for anybody listening, like, I just want to be clear to the audience, like, I think that having these kinds of conversations are good. I don't want anybody to kind of like take away the long. Obviously, Kamali's been a long time friend of the show. We're happy getting into the weeds. We disagree on like maybe 1% of issues, so it's always fun to flesh that shit out. So, but anyway, it was great having this collaboration tonight. Obviously, we're gonna do more in the future. So for anybody who's watching from Radical Democracy Show, hit that subscribe button on the Vanguard. Anybody watching on the Vanguard, hit that subscribe button on the Radical Democracy Show. We're all in the elevator up here, guys. Peace out and take care, everybody.
Yeah, peace, guys. Have a great night.
Peace.